So which is better, building bookcases from scratch or using IKEA? Let's get into it. I've built 2 walls of floor-to-ceiling built-ins in my parents' 1915 home, one with IKEA Billy bookcases and the other with bookcases I built from scratch. And today we're getting into the pros and cons of each, including the difference in price, which may surprise you. So first up, let's talk about the pros of the IKEA Billy bookcases. This is probably the most popular option for DIYing bookcase built-ins because they come in a couple different sizes and widths and also have corner units and height extenders that you can buy. And the extenders were super helpful for me because my parents' ceilings are 12 feet tall. Billy bookcases are also easy to assemble, well, as easy as IKEA assembly can be, and relatively inexpensive compared to solid wood pre-built bookcases. Plus, you don't need any fancy tools to build or assemble them. So if you're an extreme beginner DIYer and don't have any power tools, IKEA Billy bookcases are probably a great option for you. But there are also some big drawbacks. So like almost all IKEA furniture, Billy bookcases are made from MDF, which is less durable than solid wood furniture. That becomes a problem because bookcases need to hold a lot of weight because books are heavy. And Billy shelves are notorious for sagging over time because the MDF is too weak to support the weight. MDF is also notorious for warping and bubbling when exposed to water, so you'll have to be careful never to spill anything on it. You can reinforce Billy shelves to make them stronger by installing metal braces under each shelf, or in my case, I just attached a face frame to the entire bookcase front that added a little more structure and rigidity to the shelves. But it's still not a perfect solution. Another big problem for built-ins is that the Billy bookcases come with a folded back, which creates a visible crease on the back of your bookcase. This may not bother you, but if your goal is to make everything look like solid wood, this will be a dead giveaway that it's not. You can get around this by swapping out the included back with a sheet of 1/4-inch plywood, which will also help increase the stability of the bookcases. But I didn't notice the crease until it was too late and I already had these in place, so I had to cut out individual pieces of cardboard and glue them to the back of each shelf to cover up the seam. Also, if you plan to add a face frame to the front of your Billy bookcases that just makes them look really built in and more like furniture, keep in mind that the fronts of the shelves are not flush with the sides, which drove me crazy. That means that there will be a big gap between the shelves and the face frame. So to fix that, I had to rip down 1/8-inch thick filler pieces of wood and nailed them onto the front of the shelves to close the gap before I added the face frame. Of course, if you don't have a bunch of power tools to rip down 1/8-inch thick filler pieces, I'm not really sure how you would fill this before you add that face frame. One thing to note, this also created a double seam on the front of the shelf, which I did not love, and I ended up filling with Bondo to make it disappear. But Bondo is stinky and very difficult to sand, so it was just another big headache that I had to deal with. And the final drawback of any piece of IKEA furniture that's finished like this is that the finish is incredibly difficult to paint over. And that's the point. It's easy to clean up spills or anything that gets on it because nothing wants to stick to it, including paint. So you have to use a special shellac-based primer before painting. And even then, you have to do multiple coats. I actually had better luck using spray paint as a primer when I did the built-ins a second time, so I'd suggest that as well. So that's the IKEA Billy bookcases. Now let's talk about building your own bookcases. I chose to do this for the second set of built-ins because I was fed up with the issues I ran into with the Billy bookcases, and I wanted to see if I could create a stronger product with fewer headaches for potentially less cost. So let's start with the pros. Plywood is absolutely a stronger material to work with than MDF. It's going to hold a lot more books without sagging and is more likely to stand the test of time. It's also more moisture resistant if you spill something, and it takes paint easily, unlike IKEA furniture. I used birch plywood throughout, which is a nice smooth wood grain that you can either paint or stain, so it's nice to have that option too. Now let's get to the negatives. If you're building bookcases from scratch, you're gonna need power tools. That's just unavoidable. And of course, you can always go rent these from your local hardware store, but I prefer to own my tools. So I used a circular saw with a rip cut guide to cut the plywood sheets to width, and then my miter saw to cut them to length. I also used a pocket hole jig throughout to piece everything together, and a drill and impact driver for screwing everything together, along with a variety of clamps. Tools are always a big upfront investment, but if you do multiple projects like I do, they do pay for themselves over time. If you're building from scratch, you also don't get to pick from fun add-ons like corner shelves or extenders. You have to design and build them yourself. So to extend these bookcases close to the top of the 12-foot ceilings, because plywood only comes in 8-foot lengths, I bought a dowel jig and used dowel and glue joinery to make my sides extra long. But if you have normal height ceilings, this may not be an issue for you, but I just had to get crafty. When you're working with wood, there's also the problem of twisting and warping. So typically plywood sheets are flat, especially when you're buying nice plywood, but you have to be careful to store your cut plywood pieces flat as well so that they don't bend and warp, because then your bookcases will be bent and warped. Speaking of which, you need to be careful about racking, which is when the bookcase tilts from side to side until you get the back on. This was a big headache for us, and we put the back on while it was still crooked. We just didn't realize this was a problem, and then later realized it was super crooked and then had to deconstruct it, force the bookcase level, and then reinstall the back. A big pain. We learned later that attaching a temporary diagonal piece to the front would have kept it from rocking while we worked on the back. So if you're going to build from scratch, I definitely recommend trying that. Now let's talk costs. One large Billy bookcase costs $59 plus 3 extenders to reach the ceiling at $30. Add in tax, and that brings the total IKEA cost to $172. To build the same size bookcase with plywood, it cost me $54 per sheet of 3/4 inch plywood and $32 per sheet of 1/4 inch plywood for the backs. I used about 2 sheets of 3/4 inch and 1 sheet of 1/4 inch per bookcase. So with tax, that brings the total DIY cost to $152. About $20 less than the IKEA Billy bookcase and much sturdier construction. So yes, building from scratch will save you money, but not a ton of money. The real reason you would choose DIY over IKEA is for increased durability and longevity, if you're worried about shelf sagging or water damage, and if you have the tools to make it happen. If none of those things is a concern for you and you don't mind paying a little bit more, IKEA may be a better option. Now, here's my pep talk for you. If you're a beginner DIYer, building bookcases may seem really intimidating because they're so big, but let me tell you a secret. It's just building a big box with dividers inside. And once you learn how to use a pocket hole jig for construction, that's all you really need. Just lots and lots of pocket holes to create a big, sturdy structure. This is actually one of the more straightforward things that you can learn to build, so it could be a great opportunity for you to learn new skills. I often get asked how I learned to do all of this, and the answer is YouTube, and at this point, thousands of hours of trial and error. Now, you don't have to turn DIY renovation into your life like I did, but I didn't know how to do any of this just a few years ago. So if you're looking for motivation, I'm your girl. You've got this. If you're willing to try and make mistakes and learn how to fix them, you've got everything it takes to be a great DIYer. All right, now that you've seen both built-in bookcase options, I'd love to know, which option would you pick? IKEA or built from scratch?